My name is Noor Abbady. I'm originally from Jordan. I was born and I grew up in Amman, Jordan, and I moved to Atlanta, USA, about 11 years ago. I met my husband. My husband was here before me, and I met him on one of his visits to Amman, and we had that distant relationship for a while, and then I moved here with him. We got married and I moved here with him. We have two sons, Omar, 11 years old, well, 10 and a half years old, he's not 11, 10 and a half years old, and then Ahmed, who's 6 years old. What I do for a living, I am in education. I work for Educational Testing Service, which is the world's largest organization that does placement tests, TOEFL, SATs, GMAT, GRE, and all these type of tests. We develop and score these tests. I am also a speaker, and I manage operations in an interfaith organization that aims to build bridges of understanding between people of different faiths. We cover the 6 major world religions, that's Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Sikhism. We train and certify speakers to give presentations and participate in panels and all that nice work. And I also like to play the piano, I run, and I also paint.
What has your personal experience with death been?
My personal experience with death. I would say my first conscious experience with death was when my best friend's sister, little sister, was diagnosed with cancer, bone cancer. I was probably in 8th or 9th grade, and we saw her going through all these therapies and surgery. She traveled to the U.S. to get her surgeries done, and after 2 years, she actually passed, or maybe less than 2 years, she passed away. And that was my best friend's daughter. I can't say that I was fully able to comprehend the concept. It was bigger than me. But I could feel the depth of pain that the whole family was going through. But still, I wouldn't say that that affected me personally. The first time I actually felt death, when somebody is actually present with you and then they're gone, was when my grandmother passed away. That's my dad's mother. In Jordan, most people don't live in single-family houses like this. They live in buildings. So we had this building, and we lived in the first floor, and my grandmother lived in the second floor. And we used to, see each other all the time. She would come down sometimes, have meals with us. We'd spend the day with her sometimes. And she was old. She was in her 80s, but she passed away. She had, I think, a surgery in the gallbladder, and then she had many complications after that, and she passed. And my dad was the only son. He has sisters, but he was the only son of his mother. So I could feel how deeply it was painful, I think, for him. So that was my first experience. And then another one when I was here in the U.S. was when my grandfather passed away, and he was very dear to my heart. He always liked his grandchildren, and he always played with us and had candy for us, and he loved to play with children. I think he had the soul of a child in him. So I missed him, and I was here and he passed away there. So that was kind of a different experience, when you experience the passing of somebody while you were very distant and you can't really be there with them. So these are, I'd say, the 3 personal experiences with them.
What are your personal beliefs about death, dying in the afterlife? And what are your religious or cultural views on death, dying in the afterlife?
So in my culture, growing up in Jordan, I wouldn't really very much separate between the culture and the religion. They're very closely and tightly intertwined. The religious views are that this life is but the temporary life, and there's an eternal life after that. And that death is a test for the family and the friends of the deceased. So that's our views of death. The way my culture there are some cultural practices that are not really related to the religion, but they don't really contradict each other. They kind of feed into each other and inform each other.
Would you say that your beliefs about death stem more from your religious association with Islam or Muslim culture, or your personal experiences?
So again, that makes me go back to the question before, and that's because they don't really contradict each other. Actually, the religion, the faith, kind of gives us that consolation that we look for when we miss someone that we used to live with us and we loved. The only consolation is that we're going to meet in an eternal place. This was only a transitional phase, and that eventually we're going to meet for them. Another consolation that the faith offers is that even if a person passes or dies, if we still do good or good deeds on his or her behalf, it kind of reaches them. Okay. So people, even if, like say, for example, when my grandfather died or my grandmother died, I witnessed my parents giving charity on behalf of their parents because they believe that that's still going to reach them. They're still going to feel it. It's still going to reach them in their grave or in their whatever transitional phase that they're in. So they don't contradict each other. I would say, for the most part, faith is the only thing that kind of gives consolation and comfort to the people when somebody dear to them dies or passes away. Indeed, the first thing that people say to a family member or friend of a person who just passed, that to God we belong and to Him we shall return, and that kind of makes people feel comfortable.
That's beautiful. How do you talk to your children about death, and what are some of the questions that they have asked concerning what they've been taught from their peers, what they see in movies and on television or in other forms of media?
That's right. And believe it or not, the simple question, basic questions that the children ask, appear to be simple or easy, but then they teach you a lot about very deep philosophical, sometimes even cosmic questions that you haven't thought of. So my children's questions actually do push me to research more and to be able to simplify. If you're able to simplify a big idea, that means you really have a good, grasp. You understand it. So my children's questions, my older child actually is very active philosophically, constantly asking questions about existence, about dying. And now he's kind of in that resting phase where he has his answers, and I'm thinking that he's going to go active again and ask more questions. The younger one, who's 6 years old, he's always asking about what happens. Do we die? Do we only die when we're old? Do we only die when we're sick? I wish that we all die at the same time so that we don't miss each other. And things like that. I try not to paint a gloomy feel, to death. But I'm not sure if it's inherently sad. No matter how much I make it look or sound that this is real. Death is real, and it's a nature of life. People are born, and humans are born, and humans pass. That's a life cycle. So their questions are: where do we go? Does God take us away? Does God love us? If He loves us, why do we die? And I try to explain again the cycle of life, that this happens to everybody. And because we believe that this life is transition, it's a transition to an eternal life. It's not the end of it. Again, that kind of completes the picture for them and helps them understand that it's not like they're gone and they're forever. Hopefully, we're going to meet them in a better place. That's another consolation, that the dead person is with God's mercy. So, since we believe that God is the most merciful, that kind of also gives people, again, the comfort and the consolation that they need. So am I able to answer my children's question all the time? Sometimes I tell them that I don't know the answer and I need to look. Other times I try to tell them that this is the reality of life. We need to accept it. We believe in a merciful God, and hopefully we're going to meet them somewhere, sometime.
So you said your younger child asked these questions. Has he had personal experience with death?
The younger one no, he has not. The older one, remember I mentioned my grandfather who passed while I was here. Now, he passed when my older son, Omar, was 5 years old. And I was so taken by the news when I heard them. It didn't occur to me to tell my 5 years old son. We visit Jordan. We try to visit Jordan every year. So he had seen my grandfather. And as I mentioned, my grandfather was so much, he loved children. Again, probably because he had that child's soul in him, the spirit. So apparently he's stuck with my son. That whenever we go to Jordan and we see that great-grandfather, he played with me. He loved him. And it didn't occur to me to tell him. The next time we visited Jordan, he asked me, he said, "Where's your great-grandfather?" I said it casually because it's been months ago. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, he passed away." And he was so shaken. He said, "You didn't tell me."
Wow.
He was so surprised, and he missed him so much. A few months ago at their school, they had this activity in the classroom where they were lighting candles and putting them in water in the spirit or in remembrance of people that they know, or a pet, an animal that passed, to kind of send them a thought, a positive thought or a prayer. And I said to my son, I said, yeah, did you know somebody who passed? He said, yeah, my great-grandfather. And I was so surprised that he remembered him, even though I think it was only maybe 2 or 3 times that he met him in his life. But apparently that positive memory just kind of stuck in his brain. So that's, and if you ask him, I think he would also be tearful when he talks about it. That's his own personal experience with death now.
Wow. That's amazing. It's considered taboo in your culture when a death occurs.
So I read that question, and that's the one is the question that stopped me the most. The first thing that comes to mind, I mean, there are some issues or expectations regarding dress code, but they're not really considered as taboos. There's respected, dress code issues that hopefully we'll talk about later. But I can think of, the first thing that came to my mind is remarrying. That's kind of considered a taboo. So both for men and women, but particularly more for women. And while part of this comes from the religion, because the religion teaches that a woman, if not pregnant, needs to wait for 4 months before she's able to remarry. Some scholars say it's about making sure that there's no pregnancy or so, because if she's pregnant, she cannot remarry until she has a baby. That's from a religious standpoint. But in terms of culture, the expectations are more strict, I would say. Even if a woman passed 4 months or so and she's ready to remarry or engage in a relationship, it's kind of frowned upon from her surrounding or society. So that is the topic the first taboo that I could think of. And also the same is for men, but they seem to be a little more forgiving if he wants to remarry after 6 months. Now for people who are, I can speak from my family, they're observant spiritual Muslims, I don't see that they would have a problem if a woman in our family feels ready after that 4-month period passes and she wants. I would say my parents particularly wouldn't have an issue because their focus more is on the spirituality and the teachings of the religion. They don't care much about what the society thinks. Now, we talked about the 3 days of paying respects.
Yes.
In that open house, people are expected to dress, not to dress much in bright colors or to act happy, or it's not the time to even cheer up the family of the deceased person. It's more time to pay respects, to give moral and spiritual support. That's what expect. Laughing, giggling, all these, it's kind of frowned upon.
So no telling happy stories about, jokes or things that person
If it's something that's going to bring a nice memory, happy memory of the deceased, that would be acceptable. But something that would bring like laughs, and not then. Okay. After maybe a couple of weeks or so.
What if the person just wasn't a good person and there's nothing positive
to
say?
That's another taboo. So, and that's also inspired by the teachings of the religion that you're not supposed to talk ill of a person who passed.
Okay.
Never. Even if they were terrible. Try to remember the best things that they happened and focus on that. That's considered like really frowned upon if you start talking ill about that person. He did this or she did that, or not after they pass.
Okay. What are some of the customary dressing practices for those who are mourning, and what are the deceased dressed in for their burial?
So for the burial, I don't know if we talked about it earlier, the burial proceedings need to take place immediately after death happens. That's how Muslims show respect to the body, because the body of a human is considered sacred. So they need to take care of it while they're alive, and they also need to bury it as soon as it happens. So normally within 24 hours. There's no embalmment, no cremation in Islam. Just the body is washed and is wrapped with white cloth, natural cloth, and is buried and let to basically decompose naturally. So that's regarding the deceased. Regarding the family, they're expected, the immediate family for the most part, it's black. If they wear a scarf, it's either black or white. And the people who come to pay their respects, it's mostly black or dark colors, nothing that's cheerful or...
How do women play in your culture's death culture?
That question also, it's more of a community thing. So because the social structure in most Muslim majority countries, and I can talk about Jordan. The social structure is people. It's more collective. You know, it's more about the collectivism more than individualism. So family and friends really do come close to each other and just try to support each other. So I can't say men versus women. I know for sure that we talked about cooking and feeding. For the most part, women are the caregivers. They are the ones who cater. Nowadays, people actually buy food from some restaurants or caterers. But when it comes to cooking, if someone's gonna cook, it's gonna be the woman. So that's the part that they take. The men, on the other hand, are the ones who do the actual burial. It's a family and friends, but it's men. I have never seen a woman who's actually putting the dead body in the ground. I couldn't really think of anything else. Do you have any experiences in other cultures? Maybe I can relate to it, or.
Well, I know for a fact at the funeral home where I'm doing my apprenticeship, when there is an Islamic or Muslim, I don't know if the term is interchangeable.
So Muslim refers to a person. Islamic is an adjective that is used to describe things but not people.
Okay.
So for a Muslim, if you want to refer to people.
So when a Muslim dies, especially a male,
okay,
I'm not allowed to even be in the room.
No, you're not, because they wash the body, and the body is going to be basically naked.
So it's protecting modesty.
It's protecting modesty, and it's only those who are close, family members, are allowed to see the body, wash it, and wrap it.
Okay.
Both for men and women. So if it's a woman who passes, it's expected for women to actually do the washing of the body, and maybe the spouse. But other than that, I'm glad that you brought this up.
And there's something else I didn't even think to write, but I know there's an incense or some scent that's burned in the embalming room when the body's being shrouded. Do you know anything about that or what that is?
For Muslims?
I believe so. I don't know whether it's to cover the smell of the deceased if there's been some decomposition taking place, but they burn some sort of incense or oil. There's always a very...
I think I know what you're talking about, but these things, these kind of fragrances or whatever natural... Some people, it's customary for them to use that whenever they are... so they would have burn that in their homes normally. They have guests if they have.
Okay.
So it's something I don't know. I haven't experienced that in our tradition, but I can see why some people would do that.
Okay.
But I don't think it's to cover up any kind of smell, because if we consider that the body is buried within 24 hours, I don't think there's any kind of smell that we need to cover up.
Okay. I know, or maybe it's another faith, but what if someone wants to be buried in their home? Like not in their home, but their home country.
Home country.
What are the regulations for that? Are you aware of that?
I am not aware of that. I have known of some people who ask for their body to be shipped to a different place, but I don't know of any of the regulations or I'm assuming that it should be okay. I don't know why not. Yeah.
Okay. I'm asking because I know in some cases airlines won't accept bodies without embalming, and I wondered if that contradicted with the belief of no cremation, no embalming, the 24 hours.
I know for sure that they're not going to do embalming.
Okay.
For sure, because the body is required to decompose. And Muslims do believe that this body is just temporary. The flesh is just temporary. So it's not,
Do you feel as if knowing that or having that belief that this flesh is just temporary, is that liberating for you in any sense or in any way?
In a way. I mean, sometimes it is a belief, but it's something that you believe in. But to kind of be able to completely comprehend and live that belief that you have is not that easy. Sometimes we're a little bit detached. So it is liberating. And again, this is what people use in my culture and my religion to give comfort to each other. Whenever a disease happens, or they're sick, or that's what they remind each other of. That don't worry, don't have that lots of pain, or because this body is just temporary, and your eternal life is not going to be in this body. So that's how they give comfort to each other. Do I live that? If I tell you, oh yeah, I live that day in and day out, and I don't care about what happens to my body, I would be lying. But I try to remind myself constantly.
Okay. I know for the Muslim services that I've attended, they seem to be very quiet. There's not a lot of outward mourning as I've seen in other cultures, like my cultures, with the screaming and the falling out over the caskets and the "why me?" and
Okay.
is that a part of the culture, or is that an unspoken rule?
It's part of the religious teachings is to be patient and to kind of accept God's will. It's a test, and the more patient you are in accepting it, the more reward that you get.
Okay.
Again, it's also sign. It doesn't mean that we don't show our sadness or our mourning. And if we need to cry, then let be. We have to cry. Actually, Prophet Muhammad lost a couple of his children, his sons. So his son was maybe 4 years old or so, and he was crying. He was crying so, and his companion said, "Why are you crying? You told us that this life." He said, "But I'm human, and it's only natural for me as a human being to cry for the loss of my child." So to be able to keep that balance, not to kind of have that be resentful against God's will. Try to accept it. Try to understand and embrace your humanity, and at the same time, you have to express it. You can't just pretend that it's okay, it's fine. We're humans at the end. So that said, it doesn't mean. I think what you've seen are good examples. I have seen something else also in my culture, where women are screaming and they're all the things that you just mentioned. I have seen that, but in general, if that happens, you would see people coming out and tell them to calm down and try to give them those reminders that we just talked about earlier.
Okay. Is there a different protocol, so for lack of a better word,
right,
when a child dies or when there's an unexpected death, like not a sickness or?
No, it's all the same.
Even
if it's an infant. Indeed, one of my good friends just she had a miscarriage at 32 weeks of pregnancy. So that baby was basically 4 pounds, 3 or 4 pounds. And they did the same burial proceedings that we do for grown-ups. The baby is given a name and the same burial proceedings that we do for grown-ups. So no, there's no difference.
What about the detachment of a limb for whatever reason?
They bury it as well.
They bury it
even if the person is alive and say they have to do any kind of detachment, or they have to bury that body part.
Okay. What is in Jordan? Is funeral service a business or a service?
A very good question. I don't know. I'm assuming it's a service because I haven't seen things advertised, or I'm assuming it's a service, but I really don't know. I can double check for you.
That would be greatly appreciated.
Okay.
Coming from Jordan and experiencing our cultures, I don't know if you've ever attended a funeral or memorial outside of your culture or religion. What are the differences that you notice?
Memorials, I have. I would say it's pretty much the same. What I saw the difference are the eulogies. I haven't seen that in my culture, and it's something that I've admired whenever I attended a memorial where someone would stand up and again bring those nice memories and things. And I see that we have the reasons to kind of be able to do that, because again we're encouraged to talk, the good things that person used to do or that happened to him. But that's the main difference. Other than that, I would see the same signs of showing respect to the family and all the empathy and all these nice feelings that we share with each other. I'd say that's about it.
That's it?
Of course, the caskets, I haven't attended funerals for people outside my faith here, but I know of the embalming and the caskets. We don't have that for the Muslims in Jordan, but in Jordan there are also Christians. I'm not fully aware of how they do it, but I'd assume that it's pretty much similar to the way they do it here in the U.S.
Hard question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is it, if words were allowed to be said about you in the event of your demise?
Wow.
What do you want to be remembered for? How do you want your children to remember you?
Okay, you're getting me out of my comfort zone here. I remember when me and my husband, this is not the first time we actually have to discuss that. We did our pilgrimage, which is considered one of the pillars of Islam, to do the commemoration of the life and trials of Abraham. So after a person is planning to, or when a person plans to go to do the pilgrimage journey, they're required to write a will and to kind of plan what if they don't come back. And this is a protocol. So it was that we did that 4 years ago. So we had 2 children, and we had to sit and think about what if we don't come back, because it's packed, you know, a communal event. Millions of people go in that small place in Mecca. And it was a very emotional time for both of us. I haven't thought about what I want people to remember me with. I think we all wish to be remembered somehow. Maybe for my attempt to make whatever place that I live in, whether it's Jordan, whether it's here, to always try to make it a better place in whatever capacity that I have. Here I feel that we live in such a beautiful, colorful society, to bring more understanding between those different people, to overcome prejudices and discriminations and get to know each other. I worked so hard to overcome my own prejudices that I grew up with without me knowing it. I mean, I didn't have a choice growing up with these, but I tried so hard to overcome these, and I try to spread the same message around me. So if that's one thing that I'm remembered with, I'd be happy.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Do you feel, you mentioned prejudices, I've learned so much from just speaking to you for the last 30 minutes that have helped me become aware of prejudices that I didn't even know I had.
Right.
And listening to you, I've learned so much. Do you feel as if by understanding others' death cultures that you could understand where they're coming from as a whole?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just like you learned from me, I'm learning from you how to approach and tackle topics that we're not most comfortable talking about. And as I am talking, I'm realizing, you know what? This is really important. You just talked about taboos, and I'm like, yeah, probably the topic of death in general was a taboo for me. Or maybe if not a taboo, just a topic that I wouldn't really want to discuss, or I'm not comfortable. You know, it's convenient for me not to talk about it. So I think that's a great topic. So I think the first step is to get out of that, you know, the discomfort that surrounds death. And the next thing is to understand how other people understand it and approach it. So absolutely. And given that I work actually in the interfaith, I have all these the prerequisites, if you may, for understanding and approaching other people. So yeah, I'm open to that.